All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming to this PST Science Collaborations meeting. It's now just gone 2:05 p.m. Pacific time, Wednesday, October the 18th, 2023. I'll just say a couple of words and share the agenda, then we'll move into the actual discussion um, as we go through here. So, where is my Zoom window? Okay, let's have a look. Yes, here we go. All right, so I think everyone I see here has signed them in already to the present attendance thing. That's good. The agenda I have for today is the following. Steve and Zeljko very kindly offered to provide a short Q&A session on the schedule update email that went round, sent out by Victor Cravendam on the 17th. That's just yesterday, as we have this meeting. For those who might not be on the relevant mailing list, I've pasted that email to the end of the agenda live notes document. So we all have that to refer to should we need it. And I understand Steve will say a few words before we do that. The main body of the meeting after that will then, by the schedule, be discussion about difference imaging. Eric Bellm has very kindly prepared a presentation, and we'll have some discussion after that, and then we'll see where we go. So I think that's everything I had. Before we do launch into the schedule update, are there any questions or comments anybody wants to raise before we start in on this? All right, I don't think I see any. I realize I've not asked for a volunteer to take notes, but I can take that on for today. If anybody wants to help me, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I will take notes as we go through this. And with that, I think I'll stop sharing and hand it over to Steve, if you're ready, Steve.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it seemed to me since this meeting was happening and the notice just went out, it would be good to take a little time here. Just as a reminder, just recall about a year ago, as we saw how all the pieces were coming together for the project, we realized that, and we get together at least quarterly as a project to re-optimize, given that not all of the pieces come together exactly as originally planned. But in order to get to the earliest and best science, recall about a year ago, it was clear that removing the on-sky data taking time for ComCam in favor of just putting the LSST camera, the big camera, on Sky, because it was going to be available as needed in the sequence, made sense. But we always said it was there if events conspired to make it useful. And I will just say that, and you'll hear more from Zeljko, and Aaron may want to say a couple of words about the camera status, that it is clear that in a re-optimization, it's a good idea to put ComCam back on Sky, particularly for commissioning the telescope, and there with the main focus is on the active optic system. I just want to, and the reason I asked to just talk here is I hope everyone understands, we really want the community to know as soon as we know. We try to get these notices out right away, even when we don't have every last I dotted and T crossed, because we want to share with people, they know what's going on. And then as we understand things further, of course, we'll give updates. The best place to look is ls.st/dates. Let me turn it over to Zeljko.
Schedule update. So nothing much changed. The schedule forecast is still the same. We think will be done in about 2 years from now. That didn't change, but it did slide. The 0 point change, unfortunately. So there were a number of unplanned events, both at the summit and with LSST cam at SLAC. So there are two main sets of activities. At the summit, we need to complete TMA. We need to integrate optics with the TMA, which includes coating of M1, M3, etc. So our summit integration team believes that they could have TMA ready with integrated optics by July of next year, July of 24. If we had LSS cam ready, then it would go on the telescope in July. So that's about 9 months from now. But unfortunately, we don't think we will have LSS cam at the summit by that time. There is a problem with vacuum leak, and there is a bit of good news that the leak was plugged last Friday, I believe. So far, the vacuum is holding up. There were some additional tests with the second phase of that fix with adding epoxy. That tests are not giving us clear answer that we should go and apply epoxy as a second step. So there are more details to it. At this moment, it's moving in the right direction, but we are not out of the woods yet. Assuming that it will go as planned and that very soon we will commence the last phase of EO testing, we are planning to fix the shipment date in February of next year. And at this moment, it seems that we could ship the camera in March to the summit, and it would be ready to go on TMA in October of 24. Now, you remember I said TMA will be ready in July, and that opens a window of about 2 to 3 months where there is a good chance that ComCam would go back onto the TMA and we would get some on-sky engineering data. And decision whether we will do that or not will be made in January or around January of the next year. That, of course, will be dependent on whether we stick to the existing plan on the summit, as well as the camera team confirming that they fixed the leak. That's where we stand. So if everything goes according to the current plan, then we would have system first light with LSS cam in January of 25. And we think that operations readiness review could happen in late May or June of 25. And hopefully before the end of calendar year 25, we would have operations and LSS going on. That's where we stand right now. The main risks are, of course, that things on the summit do not progress as well. Our team, integration team, says they're rather confident in the plan as it is. So we are talking about 9 months. Historically, we were moving at 80%. So if you add 20% on it, you get maybe 2 months more. So in this case, we'd lose ComCam on Sky if LSS cam arrives on time. But the other risk is that we are going to successfully accomplish that fix of the vacuum leak and that everything will go well with EO testing and that we will actually ship the camera in March. So these are all risks that we have. It's hard to predict future, as you know. So this is, I told you everything that we know. There is nothing that I held back. So back to you, Steve.
No, I think that's it. Let's, I think, open the floor for questions.
I can start with one, what people are thinking. Thanks, Zeljko, that's great. So in terms of what dates people who are working on NSF proposals or follow-up proposals might put down for when LSS main operations can start, it sounds like the number we should now use is, what, December 2025? Do I hear that right?
Late 25. So optimistically, it could happen as early as June of 25 for LSS start. I don't think it can happen before June of 25. I'm hopeful it will happen by the end of 25. but that's the range. So we can't be more precise than that. We do understand it's a problem when you have to write proposal. We write them ourselves, but that's the best we can do at this time. All these dates are not earlier than.
All of them not earlier than. Okay, that's consistent with what we've been hearing. Thank you.
Meg?
I see Meg's hand is up.
I guess my question is how much of the camera status can be made public and when? Obviously, you're testing things, but some people, at least in my collaboration, are wondering, should I put in a proposal if it's really a year delay? Because we kind of heard at LSS year 5, at least publicly, of like, well, we don't know what's going on with the camera, so it could be this, it could be that, right? And so I'm just wondering if, as you said, there's been progress of actually there's been an attempt to plug, right, where there was talk of we might have to rip the whole camera apart. I know that necessarily isn't right, or like the discussions of that. So just wondering, is there plans to update the community in some way?
Of course.
That people were debating about this, because I think some people are like, oh, they're still assessing, right? It'll take months before they do something, because obviously this is serious. But it sounds like there's been a lot of progress right now. I'm just wondering how much can we say, or is there some way you'll give an update at some point for people?
This discussion is 100% public. It's being recorded and it will be posted. Number one, maybe Zeljko or Aaron, would you like to say a couple words on this?
Let me step in. So, I mean, Zeljko gave the highline summary, and it is true in our discussions of this, we have, we have identified that if we could not patch this vacuum leak in place, and we needed to disassemble, it's not the whole camera, it's the utility trunk. That's the back cylinder that has all the support equipment. That would be a very substantial bill. Okay, so we're not in that situation today. So we had a extensive meeting, so not a review, but we classified it as a notice to proceed meeting, which is a method we use when we have sort of consequential activities with hazards or risks. So we conducted that last week with a panel of engineering experts around Reuben and here at SLAM with our plans, and that committee didn't have any had some good advice, did not point to any showstoppers. So we made a decision to proceed with the first part of our remediation plan, and that was to plug the leak with a low viscosity epoxy. So that we did that on Friday, and that was successful. So right now there is no leak. We have a second step that we are going to take to apply a different epoxy and a conformal coating, so sort of coating the full region of this flange as a risk reduction step to prevent any future leaks. And at the same time, we were conducting tests on a sample flange, so not part of the camera, a duplicate of this feature that we built. And that testing indicated a problem at the second step. So at this point, we are going to proceed cautiously, both on the camera and with further testing. So now, in terms of more public statements, there is the monthly message from the observatory to the full community, and I would say that for the next one of those, we can mention the progress that we have at the time that's appropriate. We are still hoping to restart this final testing period, and if that's restarted, we can certainly update the community about that. Okay. So it is a complicated story. One difficult to kind of encapsulate in a single state, but that is the status as of today. I hope that's helpful.
And I want to
say, that's very helpful. Thank
you. There are no secrets about the camera status.
I don't think there is. I think it's that the information's coming out in ways that aren't written down. It's so if you weren't at LSS if you're at 5, you're hearing it from people that were there, and then the message that came out today, or yesterday. So I think it's just the new latest rate of how you'll communicate that. So if it's going to be in a digest in early November, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think I would like to use the digest, which would, have a briefer version of what I just mentioned and whatever status is appropriate. I think that's something we can certainly do.
I will add, this is why we also use ls.st/dates, so that we don't have to do a sort of, well, at this meeting we heard this, at this meeting we heard that. Everybody has the same source. That if you tie everything at one place, it tends to reduce ground loops. So those are the two places to look.
Steve, can you remind us how often ls.st/dates is updated?
Monthly.
Monthly. Okay, thank you.
It's triggered by our agency reports that are sent monthly. And it's not exactly monthly because sometimes some budgetary information gets stuck in the process. So sometimes it's delayed by a week or two. So until agency report goes out, we do not update those LSST dates because they have to find out first. But then 1 hour afterwards, we update the website.
Yes, in that sense, it is official because it's what the agency's been told.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then when there's a big change or strategy change or something like that, then the project issues communicate, like the one Victor sent out yesterday. Okay, well, thanks very much. I know we need to get on to Eric's talk. If there are any other questions or concerns, though, we definitely would appreciate hearing them. Thanks.
And just to comment, if people do have questions after this discussion, you can enter them into the agenda live notes here, or just send them, I suppose, to, I guess, myself or Steve would get them.
And there is an announcement that I think came out yesterday that has summary of the scheduled workshop and those dates I mentioned.
Is that the email by Victor?
Exactly.
Yeah, we have that. And actually, for those in the meeting, that's pasted in this document as well at the end of the agenda for this meeting. So we will have access to that. But yeah, thanks for the reminder. Okay, before we do move on then, are there any questions or comments on this issue before we let Eric explain about difference imaging? I see Graham, your hand's up.
Hi, Will. Hi, everyone. Sorry if I missed it, and one of you said it very clearly already. Is it clear today at what point you'll know whether the leak problem is more significant and would require more extensive opening the instrument up and therefore bigger delay? Is there a clear time scale on which you'll have a yes/no on that?
Aaron, do you want to take this one?
No. It's actually a difficult question to answer. I think we're on track. Assuming that the leak stays plugged, which is the current situation, we are on track for a shipment, as Zeljko mentioned, late March. So I would say certainly, inside that time period, if things developed in a negative way, we concluded that we had to take this more extreme action, it would be in this sort of time frame. So I would say it's in the next several months.
Thanks. Appreciate it. It's a hard question to answer.
It is, actually.
Yeah. No, thanks for your candor.
Thank you. Okay. Last chance for any questions on this issue in this meeting. Okay, thanks all. In that case, I'll move on to the difference imaging discussion. So Eric has very kindly offered to tell us about difference imaging. Eric, you should be able to share screen now, so your slide should project onto. Should we just make sure it works?
That look good?
That looks good, thank you.
All right. And are we trying to finish at the top of the hour, Will? That'll guide
I'd like to finish at 5 till if we can, to give people a chance to move on to whatever they're doing next. But we'll see how we go. The discussion often ends up expanding past the time we give it.
Indeed. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'm Eric Bellm. I'm the science lead for alert production for Rubin. I was asked to come and report on status of image differencing. And so I have kind of a broad outline here of topics, and I guess I would encourage folks to jump in if they are interested with questions, because I suspect there's more material here than we'll cover in 30 minutes. There are, so I'll talk about algorithms and data sets and metrics and some of our progress on completeness and machine learning scoring of different image sources. There was some interest in crowded field processing, and I can talk a little about what we're doing with Oxel and in commissioning. I don't plan to talk about streak masking, alert latency or execution time, template generation, or alert distribution, but if those are topics of particular interest, we can circle back to them. So I will go ahead and dive in here, move maybe a little quickly, but again, I hope folks will jump in with questions on the parts that are of particular interest. I do want to start by acknowledging that alert production is part of the larger data management team, and there are contributions from a huge range of individuals, many of whom you see here in this picture from our visit to Chile earlier this year. I haven't tried to credit, individual pieces of this presentation to specific people because it is really very much a team effort, but certainly if there are problems of direction or execution, I will take responsibility for those. So, all right, with that said, let me dive into image differencing algorithms. So I think I can go fast here with this audience. The idea of image differencing is to find things that are changing, do it quickly, get rid of background sources and galaxies and crowding, and then do so efficiently. And so this is a technique with a storied history in astronomy, and we are standing on the shoulders of giants. The challenge, of course, as we know from the ground, is that the PSF is changing. Some of the naive things you might think about, sort of matching the, just convolving with the worst seeing image, you run into trouble because you need to know the PSF very clearly, and there's some numerical issues that come up. So Allard and Lupton, of course, back in the 90s, made the proposal to represent the convolution kernel as a sum of a set of basis functions, and then solve for those in a least squares sense. This is optimal when the template has enough images in it that it is noise-free or close enough, and that you have better seeing in the science than in the template. And you can allow your basis functions to vary over the image, which allows for the PSF to change effectively through the image. So in the last few years, there's been a little bit of resurgence in interest in image differencing. There was a paper by Zeljko, Ofek, and Bellm, widely called ZOGI, that proposed a Fourier space implementation of image differencing, with the major advantage here that it's more effective and more optimal when the template is not noise-free. It's also fully symmetric between the two images that you're subtracting, but you have to know the PSFs. Re-inspired by this, David Rees and Robert recognized that you could use the same sort of noise whitening ideas within the Allard and Lupton framework, and so wrote up a tech note, which you see here. And so have all the advantages of noise whitening and getting your detection thresholds right without requiring you to know the PSFs exactly. So this was demonstrated again some years ago. And so, in thinking about the trade-offs between these two algorithms, the major, I would say, advantages of ZOGI is it's fully symmetric between your two images. And if you have misaligned PSFs, it will handle those nicely. But the worry is that because you have to know the PSF very well or the ratio, there's concern that it will not perform as well in crowded fields. And empirically, working in Fourier space, you start to see issues with all the real effects in real images in terms of gaps and edges and interpolations and so on. So most of our effort on the project to date has been focused on what we're calling a decorrelated Allard and Lupton. And the major challenge there is in terms of understanding what to do when the science image has better seeing than the template. However, again, there is a proposal or an algorithmic approach here which we believe works, which is to pre-convolve the science image by its PSF. That works in a certain range of seeing. But when you do that, then plugging that through the sort of Allard and Lupton framework gives you at the end not a difference image, but directly the likelihood image that you detect on. So it requires a little bit of different bookkeeping, but the overall effect is quite similar. So we have been using this and working with this in science pipelines, and believe that we now have an implementation that has reasonable performance. This cutout on the right is a pre-convolved image where, again, the science image has slightly better seeing than the template. There is clearly still an artifact kind of dipole situation in the lower left, but I would say that overall it's a very clean subtraction and a good sign. So I think we have a fair bit more work to do here to convince ourselves that this is the solution. But I think overall, we feel pretty confident that this decorrelated approach will be successful. Will, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Does this all require that the template and the science image both use the same camera? Or could one imagine using a template image from a different camera with better seeing, or now with a PSF, how we define that, to do this?
I think
we still require the same camera in both cases.
Yeah, I think you could do that. That's not something we're expecting to pursue in Rubin for kind of a wide variety of reasons. But yeah, I think there's, people do difference imaging against other surveys with some frequency in the real world, but it's not a data management project that we're planning.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You would need to match the pass bands as well, Will.
Yeah, quite precisely, I imagine. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on this section? I'm going to keep buzzing through. All right. I want to talk very briefly about how we do our testing with precursor datasets. Obviously, we don't have LSS TCAM yet. We use a variety of real and simulated data from dark energy camera, Hyper Supreme Cam, the desk DC2 image simulations, and now also Oxel lattice. These have different advantages and disadvantages in terms of camera characteristics and depth and scale and so on. But looking at the effects of processing on real data has really been invaluable in giving us all the real effects that we see in real cameras. We run sort of at two time scales. We have a number of what we call CI or continuous integration data sets that are just a few images from each of these sets of cameras. Those run in an automated form nightly. We have a variety of sort of fairly coarse metrics that are computed, and then we can look for regressions and other changes in object counts and runtime and so on. And this has been quite helpful in catching pipeline issues that might have been unanticipated and gives us helps us keep an eye on the evolving pipeline performance. The other sort of scale we run at is monthly. We have larger subsets of these data, again, from the different cameras that we run in batch mode on USDF resources at Slack, taking sort of a day or two to sort of process hundreds of visits and full focal planes and so on. And then we take those and look at their outputs and dig in and identify problems and so on. So, and of course, there's also intermediate scale, hypothesis-driven testing where we tweak configurations and compare what happens and so on. But the tent poles, again, are sort of the nightly small processing and then the monthly regular reprocessing. In terms of metrics, I would say to date, we have not implemented metrics that I think are good enough yet. We've used kind of some rough proxies for difference image quality to try to assess proportions of artifacts and so on, and look at, the completeness of injected fakes and so on. And these certainly help us identify some issues, but I don't think they really have gotten us close enough yet to where we need to be. I'll talk a little bit later about some of where we're going next. But they have given us at least some leverage on how the pipeline is doing and allowed us to find and fix problems. At some level, the biggest challenge is that a lot of what we'd like to do is human labeling, identifying artifacts, putting eyes on the pixels is, I think, one of the most useful things, and that's unfortunately just labor intensive. This is a March 2020, which is a consequential time period, if you can recall, plot of we sort of went through and labeled a few thousand, well, maybe not even that many, maybe a few hundred cutouts with various effects, and identified sort of the proportions of various kinds of failures. And we candidly haven't redone this specific exercise since then. And so, I think that highlights both the need for eyes on data and also just the fact that it takes time. What we're focusing on at the moment is migrating some metrics into what's called analysis tools, which is a package that the DRP team has built and use. These are some of their example plots, which are extremely data rich, which they use to guide their larger scale data release processing. And this is a framework that produces metrics and plots sort of as a built-in pipeline component, and it has a number of nice features. And so we are migrating some of our old metrics and developing new ones with an eye to making use of this. And then one of the major advantages then is that we can share metrics code between difference imaging analysis in data release production as well as in alert production. There's also some nice tooling that comes along with this. On the right, of course, you see again the time series of metrics, which is similar to what I showed earlier. On the left, there's something called the plot navigator, which automatically populates the generated plots that are available through the Butler in the USDF. And so it provides a convenient sort of web interface that is populated with everyone's collections of analysis tools plots. And we just generated in AP our first set in a sprint a week or so ago, and are looking forward to figuring out how to make better use of this capability. All right, let's talk about completeness. So the way we want to assess fake source completeness is through injecting fake sources or synthetic sources, if you prefer that terminology. We've had some rough capability to do this since, again, about 2020. And it's been running in the pipelines since then. We track it again in our nightly metrics and look at it in the larger runs. We've recently brought on board a new hire, Bruno Sanchez, who is looking at this in much more detail and has sort of recharacterized how we think about it. So this is an HSC run from just this last month, looking at the efficiency as a function of the truth signal to noise. And so the sort of sigmoid curve you get here is what you would expect from just sort of, integrating the Gaussian probability. And so you were roughly following the sort of shape you expect broadly, and you see, 50% efficiency near 5 sigma, which is about what you'd expect. I would say, though, that there definitely are some bumps and wiggles here that are a little bit, I mean, you can look at the error bars and think about whether you think that matches the curve or not, but I think there's certainly some details here that are worth digging into and understanding. And in particular, I would have expected we'd have more completeness at the high signal to noise end than is apparent in this plot in particular. So, this may be, sort of a denominator effect where some of these injected fakes are falling onto masked regions that aren't actually accessible to difference imaging, but we need to make sure we've got the bookkeeping right, and the way to do that is drill in at the individual source level. So we've got these tools and just need to make fuller use of them. There is also again from the DRP team, a new source injection framework that they are using, particularly even with injecting galaxies, as you see in the perhaps blinking image on the right. So we are taking the source injection, the fake injection code that we have been using, and making sure we're sharing as much code as possible across science pipelines. One activity that I think we want to give some more attention to is thinking about how we inject sources. I mean, we can just obviously sprinkle fake PSFs all over the image, but ultimately we want to understand how difference imaging performs in resolved galaxies and in different sort of environments. And so thinking a little more strategically about how to use those source catalogs, I think, will be quite important. I'm thinking in particular about what we can do, perhaps even in prompt processing after the alerts are sent and the 60-second timer has stopped. We would still like to be able to characterize the efficiency of the image we just processed. And so perhaps using sort of an afterburner, we can get some metrics from that process, even in production. All right, I'm going to keep moving and talk about machine learned reliability scoring, sometimes also called real bogus or spuriousness. Again, the idea is that once you have a difference image source, a DS source, we know there are plenty of artifacts, and so we apply a machine learning score to try to tell us how likely it is that the source is astrophysical or not. We have a couple of point requirements evaluated a signal to noise of 6 for completeness and purity, for transient and as well as moving object science. And so those are the requirements that we're trying to hit. We are right now focusing on kind of a traditional real bogus classifier, in this case using deep learning. There's a long history here in the astrophysical literature of increasing sophistication. You feed in the cutouts of your source into this black box and get a score out. And so we have indeed implemented something like this. Sorry, my slides are in a different order than I thought. So we have this, we've trained a model, we have it integrated into science pipelines so it can provide scores. And as advertised, we're thinking about how then to generate appropriate metrics that we can feed out automatically of pipelines and use that to hone in on problems and identify bad subtractions and so on. Here is a completeness purity curve, or precision recall if you prefer. This is a model that is trained on a subset of the DC2 data. You see the confusion matrix in the middle. The 2 gold stars are just in PowerPoint, so they may not be exactly positioned correctly, but a rough idea of where those 2 point requirements are. We are near the required performance for this classifier. Again, it's trained on simulated data, so in some sense it's a little bit easier than we expect in reality, but it is a starting point. And you can see on the right that that true positives and true negatives look about like you'd expect. Will, yes, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, Eric, just to understand, in your figure to the left of purity versus completeness, do I understand correctly that 1% on both figures would mean 99%? purity and 99% recall?
Sorry, so yes,
Yeah.
one is 100%, exactly. Yeah, it's fractional rather than
one is 100%. Okay, thank you. So I wasn't quite sure what you were doing.
Yes, you're correct. The axes are mislabeled. You're right.
I see Meg's hand is up.
It just had a question about real bogus, I guess, also as well as detection. There's been concern that comets are different than galaxies in terms of their profile. ImageSim doesn't do it. There's concern that, you know, at that 1,000 square degrees, you're not going to find a faint comet and a bright comet to test on. Are there thoughts about how the real bogus is going to get tested on this, as well as the other part of sort of the detection of those?
Yeah, great question. And I think it certainly applies to comments. It also applies to, you know, trailed sources as well, you know, near Earth asteroids and so on. We certainly have ideas. You know, it's probably some combination of, you know, finding real examples, but probably we would supplement training and testing with and with some, you know, if we can generate these synthetically and inject them into data, you can use that. It's not as good as using you know, labeled real examples, but you can still use those to train the classifiers. So this is definitely something that I would say we're aware of and thinking about. And yeah, I don't have a much clearer example or a statement for you at the moment, but it's certainly on our mind.
So is this something that, like, for a commissioning test would be possible? Because the concern is that cam is not LSS cam.
Yep.
And so do you think that's possible, or something that could be done in commissioning? Because it wouldn't take long, right? It would just be 2 quick snaps of a bright and a faint comet.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a question to some extent, it's a question for like the, you know, folks planning the commissioning observations who are trying to multiplex all, you know, all the different things we need to verify and validate. But yeah, absolutely, you know, that's something that, you know, I think would come through some of the commissioning science units in particular to, you know, think about tests to run, you know, looking at, you know, sources that are not PSF-like, but are indeed transient or variable. All right, let me keep moving. So the model I just showed you was trained on DC2. That's simulated data, which is nice because you have the absolute truth, but of course it's not real data. How do we get from there to here? I think it's here to there. I think there are a few avenues that we're, I think, kind of pursuing in parallel. One is, I think, obviously there is a aspect of human labeling that is necessary. And so we have a Zooniverse project that is sort of waiting to press the green light or to press the go button to start. We're just sort of getting our strategy sorted on how best to use that. But I think we're also going to explore use of domain adaptation to take the DC2 model weights and you know, adjust and apply those to real data and then refine them with active learning. This is a little bit of a research project, but you know, we know that as the pipelines continue to change, we're going to need to keep the models updated and retrained throughout, frankly, the lifetime of the whole survey. And so this is you know, an ongoing project rather than something that, you know, we'll say is done on a certain day and never to be touched again. All right, crowded field processing. We have a data set that we've defined from DECAM that we use to test crowded field performance. It was a couple of subset of a set of fields observed by Avi Saha, looking for our Lie array and other variables. And so we picked a subset of these in G and I bands and have those sort of available in the USDF. Our last major processing of that was in 2020. It's described in a TechNode DMTN 171 if you're curious. And the major conclusions, I would say, from that run We identified a number of pipeline configuration changes that we needed to successfully, make it through the pipelines. There is some in the bottom right, you see some sort of renderings of the model PSF. They're definitely, because the ability to determine that a PSF is certainly a concern in the most crowded fields, and our pipelines at present still want you to find it. I think it was a reasonable inference of the PSF, even in these crowded fields. And in the left, you see that we were able to successfully process images as crowded as 600,000 sources per square degree, which is quite dense. We did not get back to this data until recently, and actually we have just concluded a new reprocessing of this data after migrating from Gen 2 to Gen 3 middleware and changing data centers and on and on and on. We have now reprocessed this data again, thankfully. We've got about 95% of the images that successfully finished processing. It's not the same as saying they have good image differences. Bottom right shows a cutout of the image. You certainly see in dense fields you have more bright saturated stars, but there's also, I think, more residual structure that I don't really believe. And so I think we have some more work here to drill in. So we need to understand why the images that failed and see if we can recover them if they are recoverable. But again, here I think we want to use our injection tools and artifact identification to help us make sure the pipeline is tuned. The other concern here about the crowded field is execution time. Just the sheer number of sources tends to make it slower. And so in the 2020 processing, we saw some quite long outliers in terms of processing time. We have to make sure that we're as fast as we can be. Robert, did you have a question? No. All right, let me briefly comment on how we're using Oxel. Alert production in production runs under prompt processing. This allows us to be event-driven, and preload data to meet our latency budget. So we have a specialized execution environment that we have been developing over the last year or so. And that is now in production. I can tell you more about it if you're interested. But the point is that we're now running, every time Oxel takes images, we're running prompt processing and alert production, and producing different images out of those data. We're finding operational issues and fixing them. We have not yet really started digging into the science output products. And that is sort of a near-term task to actually make sure that they're producing, decent difference images. There's still, frankly, a laundry list here, which I won't talk through, but we've got a lot of technical pieces still to do in terms of integration tasks, which is, again, the sort of the first priority of why we're using Oxel to prepare so that when ComCam goes on, we've worked out these issues. But again, this has proven a really useful and valuable sort of motivating force to get us into the right operational mindset. All right, very briefly to close, I wanted to say a couple words about the commissioning science unit. There are actually two of them. I am the head of the DIA transients group, and Mario is the head of the DIA solar system group. And so these are mostly, let me skip slides here. These are mostly folks from the science collaborations. We got a lot of desk folks. Graham and some others from Strong Lensing are there. And so Fed is here as well, of course. And so these folks are bringing their extensive expertise and scientific knowledge to help us get through the commissioning period. And so the tasks at hand are to make sure that we are thinking appropriately about how to interpret our requirements and ensure we've met them, generate you know, really good metrics and plots, and help sort of validate the whole system. And so we have a set of assigned requirements, high-level requirements in the LSAR and the OSS, that we are responsible for validating, or for providing guidance to systems engineering on how to validate. And so we are beginning those discussions. And so, you know, we're getting folks up to speed, using the pipelines, testing DIA performance in particular, around Galaxy clusters. You know, this is, I think, a great example of how having some scientists with some specific expertise allows us to leverage and extend what, you know, the project AP group can do. Michael Ivezic and his student Xu Lu are doing some nice work on DIA algorithms and configuration. And so there's a great deal more for us in the weeks ahead as we get ready for CommCam. So I will close there, and we have a couple of minutes, I guess, for questions. I think the take-home message is, you know, we all understand that DIA is critical to Rubin science, and particularly the time domain and real-time science. You know, we are building and extending our tools to let us improve our pipelines, but there's candidly still quite a bit to do. And so it's going to be a busy couple of years. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. That was great. I really appreciate the update. Thank you for fitting it into what turned out to be a somewhat shortened time frame as well. I appreciate your flexibility. So we're at about 2 minutes to the end of the hour, which I think is a good hard stop for the meeting. So I'm going to encourage that. I'm going to encourage us to write any questions we have after Eric's presentation into the agenda live notes document, and then we can go from there. Just a quick announcement before we do finish the meeting. In a day or so, I'll be sending out a poll to find out if we can find a time for future meetings that are more friendly for those not on the Pacific time zone. So please keep an eye out for that, and we'll use that to help schedule the next one of these meetings. I think that's all I have for this week. We have time. No, we don't. We've got 1 minute left of the hour. So thank you very much, everyone. Let's all thank Eric again, and Zeljko and Aaron for their presentations. And thanks to Leanne for helping with taking the notes. So thank you, Eric. I'm going to stop the recording now from the meeting, but those who are available, if you have questions that can be dealt with quickly, we can do those too. So thank you all very much for your time. I know everyone's busy. I will stop recording, and have a happy week, everybody. So stop recording.